and I get concerned when it comes to war, that sometimes, like experience might prevail over training. And another thing that also concerns me about war is that these are the countries, like every country has a lot to lose in war. But because as Kenyans, we also don't have experience with such wars, at least in our lifetimes, we have way much more to lose. So in case a conflict comes in,
we are investing ourselves very heavily in peace and stability in the region by hosting international bodies. This is not the first time we are hosting a regional parliament. I think it's the third one, right? To a regional government. There was Somalia. There was also South Sudan sometime in the past. Remember when Somalis started throwing chairs at each other I think it was in either Bomas or KICC. So we've been very heavily invested in the peace, right? We're the ones who won the peace for South Sudan. We've played a strong role in peace in the Horn of Africa. We've played a strong role in peace in Congo and in Rwanda and other places. But a good foreign policy, and this is the truth, is also focused on the economic benefits to your homeland.
You've talked about KDF and being the best trained military in the region, which is possibly true. But here's my concern when it comes to conflict with Kenya. Conflicts, I feel from my view, conflicts have always favored the people who have experience more than because in Kenya we have very good training. But as far as experience with war, we have experience with peacekeeping missions, and we don't have experience with war like our neighboring countries have. We don't have the experience that the Ethiopians have. We don't have the experience that both South and North Sudan have. And I get concerned when it comes to war, that sometimes, like experience might prevail over training. And another thing that also concerns me about war is that these are the countries, like every country has a lot to lose in war. But because as Kenyans, we also don't have experience with such wars, at least in our lifetimes, we have way much more to lose. So in case a conflict comes in, because the other thing that I'm also seeing is that there's a lot of proxy powers that are involved, some directly, some indirectly. You have Saudi Arabia, you have United Arab Emirates with interest there, you to some extent you have Qatar, and all these are working on behalf of some other superpower. You have Russia's Wagner Group also involved. You have the United States directly involved, because you will remember at the very beginning, the U.S. recalled their ambassador at the very beginning before everything went down. So there's also this argument that there's some control coming indirectly from the superpowers through these other smaller powers in the Middle East and through groups like the Wagner Group. But these are just some of the things that concern me, especially when we take a move that could potentially result in a war, and we are a country where our military doesn't have an experience with that kind of war, and the population generally does not have that experience of this is what we need to do when a war happens, like South Sudan has, like now the northern part of Sudan has, and other countries have. Mike, let me come to you in the studio, hatuja kusikia.
Ni mitambo.
Yes. Let us know, like what your three-dimensional perception of all these conversations that have been happening here in the studio.
let me say one thing. I think what this conversation first allows us to have is to want to know more, because very many people are cognizant of the war in Gaza, Russia, Ukraine, whatever, but not many Africans are aware of what's going on, the conflict like in the DRC, Sudan, South Sudan, the conflict that's going on. Not many people know. And sometimes I take this as an opportunity, because listening to Dr. Wangusi talk, he's like talking about things that there was a meeting here or there was this here, and I'm like, how did he know this? But I'm like, it's a matter of just being aware, being in the know. Again, also, is our media participating in what's going on? Are they informing us adequately? Are they informing us as it needs to be? We know that the Associated Press was banned from the White House. That one we know very well.
Yes.
Because they opted not to say Gulf of America.
Gulf of America, yeah.
Vitu kaa hizo watu wanajua. Lakini even a simple conflict that is going on, the ramifications of having the RFS, or is it RSF?
RSF, yeah.
And the implications, the diplomatic role, and I think we haven't talked about that AI generated video.
Yeah.
But these are the moments that make us say that we need to know more about ourselves. We need to know more about what's going on with our neighbors.
Now, you see, there's a problem in Kenya, and I don't know that it's only in Kenya or in most African countries.
Let's look at Kenya first.
Yeah, in that there's a lack of presentation of foreign politics issues, geopolitics. There's a domination of local breadbasket, dancing in funeral kind of politics.
100%.
Yeah, there's a domination of that.
Yes.
So there's kind of a blindness most of the population has.
Because the only time, for example, when you talk about foreign whatever was, Baba running for AUC.
And it was being presented as a local political race.
Yes.
That's how it was being presented by the media.
You remember there's a time there's some guys who had gone to
that is so true.
Obina's show, and they were saying, hata kama tunataka kufanya maandamano, tutafanya nini? Hatuwezi kata tikiti.
So those things, they're entertaining.
Yes.
But this is the problem of having a population that's generally very, I'm not even going to say uneducated is a strong word.
No.
But generally unaware of major geopolitical events.
Yes.
That could potentially affect the country.
100%.
Now, one thing that I think, of course, Ruto knows is that Kenyans tend not to pay attention to this. So those are things that people are not going to have.
He doesn't care, no.
When it comes to election time, no one is going to be thinking that I'm not going to be voting for him or her because of this foreign policy issue or this geopolitical. That never comes to play.
Hasla wa wheelbarrow.
Yeah.
Ako pale Mukuru ama whatever.
I'm not even concerned about Hasla, because in defense of our hustlers is that they don't necessarily have time to they're searching food for their families, and they don't have time to.
And that's the thing. No, that's what I'm talking about.
But what I'm talking about is the so-called the 10%, the educated 10%.
Oh,
This is the group that needs to be aware of these things. But there's such a lack of awareness that when you bring up this topic, that people are even wondering, like, why are we talking about this? One of the reasons why the results of AUC came as a shocker is because people are not aware of geopolitical events that were happening that would make these other countries not vote for Kenya. Because when it comes to voting at the African Union, this, like talking in funerals or standing on top of cars is not going to help you. Remember, we lost to Djibouti. Djibouti, I think, has only 7 diplomatic missions across the 50 something, 54, 55 countries of Africa. Kenya has, I think, 33, 34, I don't know how many. Raila, did shuttle diplomacy in more than 20 countries. The Djibouti foreign minister went to very few countries. His campaign, it was silent. It didn't have all the razzmatazz and all the drama and all the theatrics, but he did what was needed to be done. The Kenya one, they were very loud in a lot of these capital. There's something that PLO referred to as the Nairobi syndrome.
Yes.
Whereby Nairobi, like diplomats are from Kenya, or other Kenyan groups have been known to go to places and be boisterous, kind of like in a bully mode, and where diplomacy is silent. Diplomacy that works is silent. But now you go there with hundreds of people. You're filling the streets in Addis Ababa. Everyone knows the Kenyans are around, and then you go and lose the election, and then Kenyans are surprised. How did this happen when this thing, our local MCA told us it's a sure bet?
Ali, do you really think it was that? When I heard you say that, in my mind I was saying, okay, fine, the guy may have worked, the Djibouti guy may have worked silently in the background,
Yes.
right? But I didn't feel like, I didn't get that based upon what we were seeing on paper. It was basically regional block related. The voting it was down to regional plus religious. It wasn't about the diplomacy part of it. At some point, initially, they they seemed to have been stuff that was happening, and maybe it was the SADC thing that threw everybody off.
So,
but I
Let
honestly
me
think-
just let me just chime in here briefly.
Go ahead.
So the point of view and what we are traditionally used to, I think this is generally a good thing. I think it is generally a good thing. But Kenyan foreign policy has been very passive, right? We've been the gentle people, gentlemen, gentlewomen of African politics, where we are investing ourselves very heavily in peace and stability in the region by hosting international bodies. This is not the first time we are hosting a regional parliament. I think it's the third one, right? Or a regional government. There was Somalia, there was also South Sudan, sometime in the past. Remember when Somalis started throwing chairs at each other I think it was in either Bomas or KICC. So we've been very heavily invested in the peace, right? We're the ones who won the peace for South Sudan. We've played a strong role in peace in the Horn of Africa. We've played a strong role in peace in Congo and in Rwanda and other places. But a good foreign policy, and this is the truth, is also focused on the economic benefits to your homeland, right? When the Germans are heavily invested in the peace in Rwanda and Congo, it's because they are focused on the minerals. That's their focus. They're not focused on. You hear the EU has signed these big deals. Now, the question I want to ask Kenyans, we are sending the best of us to parts of the world to keep the peace, but we come back with nothing. And that is not selfish. That is geopolitics, right? So what I think Ruto is doing, which, this is one of those rare moments where I somewhat agree with him, is that he's repositioning Kenya's foreign policy to benefit Kenya economically, because we are no longer a low income country dependent on aid. And now, as we see the world changing with the USAID being closed down, right-wing governments around the world kind of becoming more assertive and internal facing, we have to also start benefiting from our engagements in the region. If and don't quote me on this, I think that's a misnomer if I'm saying it online, but if what we're going to get is the benefits of the mineral trade out of Sudan, or oil out of South Sudan, by our positioning or aligning with certain political actors there, man, so be it. Because UAE, Saudi Arabia, many countries in the Middle East, including the US, that's why they're there. That's why they invested there, right? That's why that war is going on. We've been heavily invested in the peace in Congo, but the mineral wealth is off to Europe and other foreign capitals. Why should that be okay, right?
Now.
So I think there's a case to be made that what I'm seeing generally is that Ruto's foreign policy is slightly different because he's not playing the piece. He's also trying to position Kenya to benefit, because the Haiti deployment, which I don't necessarily agree with, has positioned Kenya both militarily but also to benefit from military aid from
what
around
benefit?
the world.
Hold on, what
So there's a-
benefit?
Now, let me pause you there for
What
a minute.
benefit?
Let me pause you there because there are so many points where we will respectfully disagree because
Yeah.
there's certain things. What you're talking about is Trump diplomacy. Now, Trump diplomacy is where, like what he's doing now in Ukraine, whether it's gonna work or not, is like, if you want me to help you, give me those oil fields or that.
But why is that not okay?
Wait,
I mean,
wait a
everyone else-
second. Wait a second. I'm gonna give you a chance.
Yeah.
Where I say it's not okay, when you're not a superpower like the United States or have some kind of power like either China or Russia. This is my theory here. You might be talking about that this is William Ruto making a foreign policy play, but he's made a series of very bad decisions from when he started. I personally do not think this is the point that the good decisions are going to start coming in. And here's why I say this. I strongly feel some of these decisions that are being made are not his decisions. He's very likely indebted to so many outside forces. And now it's collection time. Whoever he had agreements with, whatever they had done together, whether it was financing his campaign or whether it was working with them or whatever it was, it's payment time. Because some of these things that are being done are not necessarily directly with the thinking that this has a possibility of potentially benefiting Kenya. There may be, I feel like there's a blackmail syndicate from outside whereby there are powers that are telling him, you now have to do this. Because Ruto right now, and part of the reason why he has also lost a lot of respect from most of these African leaders who decided not to go with him, is Kenya, especially under Biden's administration, Kenya had squarely been labeled, not even necessarily labeled, it had squarely become America's puppet, meaning anything you want, anything America wants, we are going to do it without questioning. And that goes back to the decision he made to immediately support Israel, even before, the smoke had cleared out after that initial attack.
Yep.
And this is starting to have repercussions. A foreign policy decision he made, it has had very, very ugly repercussions.
Even the DRC comments.
So I understand. Nathan, maybe you like that Trump style of diplomacy, but the problem here is that we are not a superpower. So we're in a position where if any of these major powers decides to attack Kenya through proxies, it's a possibility. All these countries that were peaceful, we never thought anything could happen. Proxies have come in and they've been able to start conflict. So I think this is a point where, because right now we don't know, maybe later on in hindsight, we might see the benefit or we might see the consequences that might come out of it. But based on the decision-making history of the president we have, he has a very long list of bad decisions. Mike, let me come to you, and then we're going to go back to Dr. Angusi.
So, I mean, here's the thing. It's again, from the little that we know, it's been blunder after blunder. We've had this conversation even before the show started. Picking the brains of a friend of mine was here, and just talking about it. And you have very many scholastic people talking about it, addressing this matter and saying that the way this matter was handled is not good. For example, PLO Lumumba saying that first you have to understand the conflict. But what he was questioning was, why would you call the French president pertaining to a matter that is African?
And then those same African countries,
Yes.
they're trying to divorce from the French.
The West African countries themselves, who are French colonies,
They're trying to divorce.
they have divorced. It's only that the person who's being divorced is fighting. Is trying to stay like is trying to put a claim. But the countries themselves said, we are done. So why would you call that guy? Instead of not also mentioning that, let's also mention the fact that, SADC already had forces on the ground trying to, because it's an agreement, they're already over there. So you are burning bridges. I was saying this. Kenya has been known, Nairobi has been known to be a place, I would call it the equivalent of Switzerland. It's neutral ground. Meaning you bring parties together, let's have a discussion, and we hash out an agreement. That is it. It doesn't matter if Ruto, somebody was saying that, Kasongo has got friends, and his friends, like the
RSF.
The guy at their boys. That is fine. As boys, you do things as boys.
Yeah.
You're the president of the country. That should not even come into the picture. Like, you're my man. I know we are boys, but here, I am a leader. I am the president. Here, what we can do is let's agree to let the warring factions, let us hash out an agreement.
Yeah.
Period.
Yeah.
And you stand that ground.
But now, coming back to you, Dr. Wangusi, is a problem here, okay, if there was a coherent foreign policy that we had, and this decision was anchored on that coherence, maybe we can say, okay, we understand that. The way countries like South Africa, and even countries like Ethiopia, like there's countries that you'll see that there's a certain rhythm and rhyme to the foreign policy decisions they make. So this instance, it kind of looks like this is Ruto diplomacy.
It is Ruto diplomacy.
Yeah, I agree with you.
It is Ruto diplomacy in the sense that he decides on something, and then the people around him, who may be competent, because of the environment that has been created, they kind of have to agree with that idea, and that goes to that principal secretary who went and posted a fake video because there was so much hunger to try to present a certain narrative that by the time they got this video, I don't know whether he deliberately posted it knowing it's fake. I honestly just think that these guys, they talk a lot, but they're not familiar with a lot of things that are happening online. But they were so quick to impress the master that they didn't take the time even to get your team to look at the video before it's posted, but they just went ahead and posted it, and then it turned out to be a fake video. There's that hunger to throw out a narrative, which has worked politically for them, but on foreign policy and geopolitically, that same strategy has not been working properly. Dr. Wangusi.
Yeah, so I get all that, and believe me, if there's someone who has been in the thick of Rutoism, as you're describing it, that person would be me, right? And I'm not here as a spokesperson. I'm a critic, but I'm also recognizing that something about what he's doing is changing the status quo. Now, the question we are trying to answer, which I frankly don't have an answer, because he has not come out publicly and said, this is why I'm involved in South Sudan, right? He has positioned it as a relationship he formed with that's based on a relationship with the RSF, but there's no coherent reason that we can tie to. For example, there's a coherent reason we can tie M23 to Kagame or Rwanda, because we know there's that ethnic connection, right? But the RSF are not Kalenjins, or they're not of Kenyan descent, so we don't. That connection is a bit difficult for us to make. So I'm as ignorant about this as any other person out there, because we don't really know what the motivation is there. Whether the chickens have come on to roost, he has debts in the UAE, and some sheikh has called him and told him, you have to pay, otherwise to pay you have to call this guy and host him in Nairobi. We don't know what the machinations there are. But what we know is what you're all describing, which is traditionally Kenya's foreign policy has been that of the peacemaker, but what we are realizing now, it has also been one of passivity, both in pursuing our military, territorial, but more importantly, our economic interests, right? We're trying to be everybody's friend, even when some of the people we're trying to be friends with don't give two hoots about that friendship, and it doesn't benefit us in any way, right? So why should we be friendly to a hostile Sudanese general when maybe we don't even have significant trade? And if we establish our foothold or a beachhead through one political actor, that can change the dynamics, right? So I think there's a change in first, there's a change in terms of Kenya's economic standing in the world, because we used to be a low-income country, and a lot of this so-called peacemaking that we did was really being driven by international bodies, right? It was the UN using Kenya as a launching pad, foreign governments kind of coercing parties to sit down in Kenya, right? So it looked good on paper, but the question I want to ask is, how did that benefit us? Because geopolitics is about looking for what benefits you the most. And we are in a country and a region that has mineral resources, including oil. We are in a country with a population dividend. We're in a region with a population dividend. We're in a region with high potential for us to thrive economically, just even by trading with our partners. I mean, I don't see a problem if Congolese minerals are to be purified in Kenya before they go into the international market. That will benefit Kenyans. There's nothing wrong with that, because that's what the EU is doing. That is what America is doing. That's why America has footprints all over the world, right?
So,
and we are not a regional or a military power, but we have certain things that are going for us. First, we are very strategically located. We have a relatively strong army. We are relatively respected in the world, and I think I'm also departing from that mindset that Kenya needs to be passive. A passive player in regional politics by just being host to governments to come and have their negotiations there and then go off and sort their issues outside, and then the benefits are cured, go to other countries.
Well, Dr.
I'm
Ngusi,
also departing from that mindset.
It's okay to depart from that mindset, but here's the problem, and you've rightly mentioned that a lot of these peacekeeping missions were being driven by international bodies. I can also bring a counter argument that these aggressive missions are also being done on behalf of international bodies. I don't think this is something that Ruto went and spent a night and thought, I think it would be a nice idea if I contact those rebels in Sudan and tell them to come to Nairobi. There is an over 90% chance that there is some outside power that's puppeteering this move. And this is where we are here, thumping chest that we are trying to get economic benefits for Kenya. However, these economic benefits you're talking about, it would be good if this was driven by our own local foreign policy. But based on the history we have, the experience we have with this government, this is most likely strings being pulled by a power from outside to the benefit of someone that we don't know. There's some personal benefit that he might get, but I am seeing doubts with what benefit we might get now that we are almost cutting diplomatic ties with Sudan. We've seen other countries cut diplomatic ties on the African continent. No benefit has actually come out of it. So that's why, like, if it's a different system of foreign policy we are getting into, if it was internally driven, then there's an argument like, okay, let's wait and see. But the problem, we already know that Sudan, this conflict, has multiple proxies involved, from the US to Russia to the UAE to Saudi Arabia. So there's definitely also some outside movement that's coming on this decision. I honestly don't think that this was our own foreign policy decision, and part of the reason is because some of these decisions, they come in so randomly and rapidly that it doesn't even make any sense. I'm gonna read a few comments here. Pole tumewa neglect kidogo leo kwa comments. Yes, we might have a number of comments. I'm gonna start with the last ones. I'm gonna slowly go back up to the to the first ones. There was a comment here that was coming from Washeke. She says, remember Nelson Mandela was labeled a terrorist for fighting against apartheid and wasn't allowed in the US for long. And then we have here Stephen JJ says, what if they shut down the airspace? Mbuyu says Kaongo is just so clueless. And Washeke says, I agree with you, Ali. KDF might be well trained but has not experienced conflict. And Kenyan media ni bure kabisa, Ali. They do, or rather, all they do is propagate nonsense from our politicians and reporting gossip. Then Marimo says, that's a great point, Ali. Experience over training. We cannot downplay how much Sudan can hurt Kenya. The airspace is our shortest route to most places. And then Apa Sambaza Nasema, you guys have so many problems about food, about Shah, and all that there is not time for geopolitics. Once you are well fed, then you will worry about other things. And Apa Sheke says, but if Kenya really is benefit, or is he accumulating personal wealth? I totally disagree with you, Dr. Wangusi. There is no benefit for Kenyan citizens. So Moshfire, let me come to you, and then we're going to go to Mike, and then we're going to try to wrap up this topic. A couple of other topics I want to talk about here.
So,
Angoa.
There's basically, this whole thing with South Sudan, it's I guess at this point, to be honest, with what we are seeing and the I guess I'd say the backlash, the outcry, and everything that's happening, Saindi, your AU chairman, should come in and, in my opinion, censor Ruto. Call the guy in, call these jokers in. You guys as African Union, or should I say not African Union, or I'm calling it African Union, that's the old name, the AUC, basically the commission, right? They need to come in and get involved. And it almost seems like the involvement at the AUC level or the AU level, or our organizations within Africa, they seem to be very it's almost like they wait for the UN to come in and say something. Then is when chaps seemingly want to jump in, but our own, like, we're not policing ourselves. And because whatever comes out of this, it will become, to me, the precedent of what would be happening with conflicts in other regions and with people taking sides, and how far one can go when you basically say, okay, I'm sitting on this side, or this is where I'm, this is my stance, here is where I am, just the same way as when Kagame came out, and pretty much called guys all the way out, SA president, Ruto, whatever, so everybody basically at this point is got their stance and saying, this is my stance, here's where I am. But who's actually reining in the troops and telling and showing these guys, okay, collectively, this is the way that we need to have regional balance for us to coexist within the continent. At some point, somebody needs to be bigger than these egos of the guys who are sitting within the walls of their countries, or should I say within the borders of their countries, because watu wana flex. Na kuna ile ya pesa inatolewa, money is, being slid here and there. And you hear that there's a force over here that's supported by these guys, but they're really not supported. But then you hear of this, and then we wait a couple of years, then it comes out that, hey, indeed, this guy was here, or, a loose Mobutu was giving money here, or a loose Kabila was giving money here, or a loose MO1, or a loose, M7, or these guys are giving. So those things need to be curtailed, and this, or should I say now, is a time for that to happen. Because if we can't do that, then how's Africa as a continent supposed to prosper, go ahead, with all the things that we see happening outside of the continent that are aimed at bringing the continent backwards? So we, the leaders within that space, need to look at the big picture. It's no longer about them and their egos. They need to look at the regional cohesion, balance, as well as moving forward. A stance needs to be taken, and maybe this is the time when AUC jumps in.
Now, Udo Mike.
No, I was gonna say, I think at some point also I think we need to be more cognizant, educated about what's going on within our country and the nether regions. We just need to know. In addition to that, we need to learn history. Just learn history. Just know, so that certain things you can understand. Like, okay, this does not make sense or whatever. Because I think
former Minister for Education Magoha said history is a useless subject,
and that is why
and this is part of the problem.
And that is why it's history.
No, yeah,
that is why it's history.
Yeah, one mic. See you, kuja tu pole pole.
No, and that is why it's history. So yeah, it's okay. Good riddance. Because guess what? It is important to know. And in addition to knowing, again, I will always go back to this, because I think it is you, Ali, who said something about, or is it Omosh, that guys are so focused on looking for the next bread, the next shilling or whatever to feed family because of poverty. Like,
yes,
there's nothing.
Yeah.
So you cannot understand. Very many of our people don't understand the goings on outside, let's say, of their county, Kenya at large. And that is why, when PLO was saying how some people believe that, when this notion of that Raila, if he wins, is going to be the president of Africa, how many people thought that, yes, atakuwa president wa?
Yeah.
Whether Africa.
No, it's just a chair of a commission.
Exactly.
But EU has their so-called
exactly.
president.
Yeah.
But wacha nikuulize, the people
Mashinani, yeah, no.
Will they know that?
They don't know that.
No, they don't know that.
And that's the point.
Yeah, they don't know that.
That is the point.
Yeah.
They don't know. They just know that Raila atakwa. There's some guys like
ataenda kutawala wa Afrika.
The Obina. He had some guys, and I mentioned this, like these guys were saying, we can't even go to fanya maandamano. Let that sink in. How are you gonna go and do maandamano for a post that does not, like,
and then
there's a lot of diplomacy that is needed.
Yes.
And then
there were some silly comments coming from even members of parliament of we need to cut our funding to the African Union.
Exactly.
Or
like,
we need to exit, like the African Union.
But you see, that is pandering to the base.
Yes,
that is
pandering
to the base.
Yeah.
Because when you tell the base that Raila did not make it because of this, they'll be like,
so now you have to explain.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that is the void of education that void needs to be really filled in. And that is why the media Ali has always said it, and we've always said this, that the media in Kenya is okay. Let me not say that they're bad.
There are a few bright spots.
They are very, very. They are bright spots.
There are a few bright spots,
You know,
like
and-
Spice now fixing the nation on NTV.
You know,
so there's a few bright spots.
and when you listen to News Gang, like
Yes.
they are educating. But I think it's like just over here. If you don't resonate with what my thoughts and feelings are, I will not listen to you. So if you don't resonate with me, that with what I feel that Raila should have won the presidency of the AU, I will not listen to you.
Yeah. Because
And that becomes a problem.
yeah, and one other thing before we go back to Dr. Angusi
Yes.
and wrap this up is, out of all these, especially this conflict with Sudan, this election with AUC, I feel like there was a missed opportunity, because the other thing that guy Mashinani, who was rooting for Baba, what they don't understand, they first of all don't understand how AU impacts their day-to-day life. They have no understanding of that. They have no understanding of how these regional bodies, like the East African community, they have no understanding. I hate saying this, but in a chat group of our very sophisticated members of my high school, there was a time we had a conversation, and it dawned on me that there are people, even people who are well educated, and this was, I think it was around 2020. I was talking about the East African community, and there was this gentleman who was saying, oh no, this thing was, it's no longer there, it doesn't exist. So he still had the history of the East Africa community
There
that
we
collapsed
There we
in
go.
the 70s.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, dude, East Africa community was created in 1999.
Where have you been?
Yeah, it was created in 1999.
Look at our past.
And this gentleman was actually arguing, like, no, until, like later on, I think he did some Googling and realized that, and this is someone who totally, for 20 years, did not know that the East African community was reconstituted.
And that is the issue, because I think also
Yeah.
there isn't, I think maybe this is 2-prong, 3-prong, however you want to dissect it. There isn't enough, like now over here, like let's say, let me look at it. Like everything that is going on, like with the Mandarin,
Yeah.
you are forced to be like, hey, but let me Google this. Hold on. What does the law, constitution, immigration, something? It makes you go and search. It makes you want to understand.
Yes.
It makes you. No, what? Let me. No. This is not making sense, because I'm not gonna take advice from a TikTok lawyer. Let me see what the government agency says.
Yeah.
What this means. What this does, or whatever. At least that it. And I remember saying that Trump's presidency in 2016 was a curse for many, but also it was a blessing for some, because you know what? It made you want to go out.
It
and
forced you to
read.
go back and
It
read and
forced
want to
you to go
understand.
read.
Yeah.
What's happening right now in Kenya, I believe, is an opportunity for many to understand historical context, whatever goes on geopolitical, like within now, just as relationships with our neighbors, Tanzania, Somalia, Sudan, whatever, Wagala massacre, like stuff like that. It's just to know. I'm not saying so that you can make a political decision, but just to know, so that once you understand the workings, then your decisions will be on point.
Yeah. So I was going to
Dr.
say,
Angusi,
with respect to this, specifically with respect to this Sudan situation. So as we've kind of discussed this, there's a question that came up regarding there was some disagreement that it gives no incentive or economic benefit to us for Ruto to make this to take this position, and rightfully so. Ali, you were saying that unless there is some imperative, which we're trying to split hairs, figure out, okay, why is this really happening? So remember, less than a month ago, the UAE was supposed to do a state visit to Kenya, and that was reversed. So the Kenyan delegation went over there. The United Arab Emirates is I think the fifth or the sixth largest trading partner that Kenya has. Think about that. Everything from meat to charcoal to flowers, all those go to the UAE. I think the trade volume is about what 450 billion Kenya shillings, which is significant. The other connection with the UAE is that the Rapid Support Force is heavily supported by the UAE because of the gold trade. So there's economic interests that are at play here. On the one hand, you have the RSF that has an economic interest in getting arms to take power. On the other hand, you have Kenya, which has an economic interest to get trade volumes through this comprehensive partnership agreement. So the fact that our president has made the decision to support the enemy of his enemy, it makes economic sense. And I don't know who else you would expect to make that decision. That's a decision that squarely falls within his sphere of influence. He's the one who has to make that decision, because I think they don't want to compromise.
So wait, so who's
that